The morning sun filters softly through the curtains. A cup of tea steams on the table, its warmth rising in gentle curls. You stretch your arms, feeling the familiar stiffness along your back. It's a quiet reminder that the body you've lived in for decades is changing. The steps feel slower, the muscles a little tighter, but the spirit still shines. Each breath carries stories of laughter, of walks, of dancing under the rain. And yet the body whispers for attention, for movement, for care. Aging is not the end of motion, but a call to move with intention, to rediscover the strength that still lives in your bones. Today we talk about a simple motion, the knee-to-toe bend, a small gesture that holds power, healing, and grace. It reconnects you with balance, with rhythm, with the ease of being alive. It asks for nothing more than your time and gentle awareness. This is your moment to move again, slowly and surely, to breathe into the spaces that once felt forgotten. Because even after 60, your body remembers, and it's ready to bend, to flow, and to thrive once more. Margaret used to wake up early every morning. She loved the stillness before the world began to stir. The sound of birds outside her window was her favorite kind of music. But lately, mornings had become heavier. Her back would ache before her feet even touched the floor. The garden she once tended with ease now seemed distant. The flowers still bloomed, but her body hesitated to meet them. She would stand by the window, watching sunlight fall across her plants. The colors were beautiful, yet unreachable. It wasn't pain that held her back, but stiffness, a quiet, stubborn wall. She tried to stretch, but her body no longer flowed the way it used to. Every movement felt like a reminder of time's gentle pull. Margaret sighed one morning, sitting with her tea untouched. She thought about how her mother once told her, "The body listens when you listen to it." That memory came like a whisper from the past. So she decided to listen. Not to the ache, but to what it asked for: movement. She started with simple things, lifting her arms slowly above her head, turning her neck from side to side, feeling each joint awaken. The first days were awkward, almost clumsy. Her knees wobbled, her breath caught in her chest. But there was something peaceful about trying again. Each morning became a quiet ritual, a small act of care that asked for no reward. One day, she heard about an exercise called the knee-to-toe bend. It sounded almost poetic, simple, gentle, yet strong. She watched a short video, observing the slow, flowing movement. It didn't look demanding, but something about it felt powerful. She decided to try. Standing tall, she bent her knees slightly, watching her balance shift. Her toes pressed into the ground as she straightened again. A soft stretch traveled up her legs into her back. It felt alive. For the first time in months, Margaret smiled while moving. Her body responded with gratitude, a quiet warmth spreading through her spine. The stiffness didn't disappear overnight, but it began to loosen, little by little. Each day, her body felt a bit more like home. The garden no longer seemed so far away. She started spending a few minutes outside again, watering her plants. Her movements were slower, but filled with intention. The breeze brushed her face, carrying the scent of lavender and soil. It felt like the world was moving with her, gently, patiently. Margaret realized aging wasn't about losing motion. It was about learning a new rhythm. Her back didn't need to be young again. It just needed kindness. And in that kindness, strength was reborn. Every knee-to-toe bend became a promise to herself. A promise to keep moving, even softly, even slowly. Because life after 60 wasn't about stillness. It was about rediscovering motion, graceful, steady, alive. The human spine is a quiet miracle. It stands at the center of our being, carrying every breath, every step, every story. It holds us upright through the years, steady and loyal. Yet with time, it begins to whisper, not in words but in stiffness, in small aches that echo through the back. For many, these whispers begin softly, a twinge when bending, a pull when standing. We often ignore them, thinking they'll fade with rest. But the spine is patient, not demanding, it simply asks to be remembered. Margaret began to understand this truth. As she moved through her mornings, she noticed how her spine reacted to care. When she sat too long, it grew tense, almost resentful. When she stretched or walked slowly, it sighed in relief. The body, she realized, speaks through sensation. It doesn't scold, it teaches. Each muscle, each joint, carries its own memory. Years of lifting, bending, and reaching all leave their quiet marks. Her back, once strong from decades of teaching and gardening, now asked for tenderness. It wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. The spine adapts as we age, curving slightly, tightening subtly. Discs lose water, joints lose their easy glide. But that doesn't mean strength is lost forever. It only means it must be awakened differently. The key is movement, small, gentle, consistent movement. Not the kind that pushes or strains, but the kind that listens. The knee-to-toe bend became that language for Margaret. It connected her lower body to her spine, teaching her to move as one. Each time she bent her knees, she felt her back release tension. Each rise reminded her that alignment begins at the ground. Her breath became her rhythm. Inhale, bend, exhale, rise, a simple harmony between motion and rest. Through these movements, she began to understand her back anew. It wasn't just a structure of bones and muscles. It was her foundation, a living pillar that carried her life story. She remembered how, as a young woman, she could lift boxes, dance freely, twist without thought. Now, every motion came with awareness. And that awareness was a gift. She began reading about how movement feeds the spine, how gentle stretches increase blood flow, nourishing the tissues, how each bend reawakens nerve pathways that may have gone quiet. Science met spirit in her living room each morning. Every small bend was both an act of biology and of hope. Margaret smiled, realizing she was not fighting age, she was working with it. Her spine, though older, still responded with life. It didn't need perfection. It needed partnership. And in that partnership, Margaret found something profound. Her back wasn't failing her, it was guiding her. It was teaching her that flexibility is more than physical. It's the art of adapting, of bending without breaking. And through her gentle practice, she learned to trust her body again. One breath, one bend, one graceful return at a time. The first time Margaret truly felt the power of the knee-to-toe bend, it surprised her. It wasn't a grand discovery, but a quiet one, almost like finding rhythm in her breath again. She stood by her window, the morning light falling gently across the floor. Her hands rested lightly on the back of a chair for balance. She inhaled deeply, letting the air fill her lungs and steady her heart. Then she bent her knees slightly, lowering her body just enough to feel her thighs awaken. Her toes pressed into the ground, her spine staying tall, her breath calm. As she rose again, something inside her lifted too. It wasn't just her body that moved, it was her energy. There was warmth spreading from her feet up to her lower back. A feeling of connection, like her body was remembering an old song. She tried it again, slower this time. Down, breathe, rise, release. Each movement was a wave, gentle, fluid, alive. It didn't demand strength or speed, only awareness. She began to notice how the movement flowed through her legs and into her spine. The muscles that once felt stiff now began to cooperate, to communicate. The bend wasn't just physical, it was mindful. It taught her patience, focus, and grace. The knee-to-toe bend aligned her body in ways she hadn't felt in years. It encouraged her balance, her grounding, her presence in each motion. Margaret realized that this simple exercise carried layers of meaning. It built stability not just in her posture, but in her confidence. Each repetition reminded her that movement could be healing, not exhausting. That effort could feel like kindness. Her back, once tense and guarded, began to trust her again. It moved with less hesitation, more cooperation. Every bend whispered, "I'm still here." She thought about how life mirrors this motion. How we all bend to challenges, to time to change, and then rise again. The exercise became more than movement. It became reflection. She started to practice it in small moments, before breakfast, before bed, while waiting for the kettle. Each time she felt a little lighter, a little stronger. The knee-to-toe bend became her reminder that health is built slowly. That flexibility grows through care, not force. Even on days when her joints felt stubborn, she showed up. She didn't chase perfection. She chased connection between her breath, her balance, and her body. And the more she moved, the more she understood what strength truly meant. It wasn't about lifting weight or pushing limits. It was about meeting herself where she was, fully and gently. The power of the knee-to-toe bend lived in its simplicity. In each small bend, she found renewal. And in each rise, she found herself steady, peaceful, alive. Margaret stood in the center of her living room, the morning quiet and kind. She placed a sturdy chair nearby, just in case she needed balance. The air was calm, and so was her heartbeat. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her chest slowly, completely. Her feet stood shoulder-width apart, steady on the wooden floor. "Let's begin," she whispered to herself, smiling softly. Her knees bent gently, her spine tall like a tree rooted in the earth. Her toes pressed into the ground as her weight shifted with care. The motion was small but meaningful. She could feel the muscles in her legs awaken, warm and alert. Her back relaxed into the movement, not against it. She breathed in as she lowered, breathed out as she rose. The rhythm was slow, almost meditative. Each breath guided the body, each motion guided the mind. It wasn't about bending far, it was about bending right. Her shoulders stayed soft, her gaze forward, her heart steady. Margaret imagined her breath traveling down her spine, through her hips to her toes. Every exhale carried away a little stiffness, a little weight. She found her flow, bend, breathe, rise, release. The more she moved, the more natural it felt. She discovered a sweet balance between strength and surrender. Her back began to loosen, the tension melting quietly away. The movement became less of an exercise, more of a conversation. Her body spoke in motion, her breath answered in rhythm. With each repetition, she felt more connected to herself. The floor beneath her no longer felt still, it pulsed with life. Her arms followed her breath, rising slowly as she bent deeper. Her joints responded with gratitude, her balance grew confident. There was power in these gentle motions, far beyond appearance. It wasn't about speed or numbers, but awareness and intention. She found herself smiling mid-bend, surprised by how peaceful it felt. Her back, once her greatest worry, had become her partner again. Every movement was a message of care, not correction. The bend reminded her of ocean waves, patient, rhythmic, forgiving. Even when her knees trembled slightly, she didn't stop. She paused, took a breath, and tried again. There was beauty in that pause, in that patience. Her breath and motion were no longer separate, they were one. Her body, her mind, her breath, all moving in quiet harmony. She finished the set standing tall, her chest open, her heart full. A soft warmth filled her spine, spreading upward like sunlight. The simplicity of the movement left her calm, yet strong. Margaret stood still for a moment, eyes closed, breathing deeply. She realized she wasn't just exercising, she was healing. Through each bend, She was learning to move without fear again. And as she exhaled one final time, her whole body whispered thank you. Weeks passed, and Margaret's mornings began to change. What once felt heavy now carried a quiet rhythm of ease. Each sunrise became an invitation to move, to breathe, to begin again. Her body had started to remember what flow felt like. The stiffness in her back no longer spoke as loudly as before. It was still there, but softer, gentler, like an old friend learning to listen. One morning, she caught her reflection in the window. She didn't see frailty, she saw balance. Her posture was taller, her shoulders open, her breath deep. The knee-to-toe bends had become more than an exercise. They were her meditation. Each bend drew her closer to herself. Her legs felt stronger, her back felt alive. The movements were small, but they carried power. Margaret realized that strength doesn't always come with force. Sometimes it comes with grace. Her days began to move differently too. Reaching for the kettle, she bent her knees lightly instead of straining her back. When she gardened, she moved with awareness, not rush. Every motion was part of her quiet practice. Her breath was her anchor, her body her guide. She started to enjoy the moments between movement, the pauses, the stillness. There was no rush, no finish line, only presence. She found herself teaching her neighbor how to do the same exercise. They laughed as they tried to find balance, wobbling like children learning to walk. But even laughter felt healing. It carried warmth through the air, like sunlight on skin. Margaret began to journal about how her body felt after each session. The first pages spoke of tension and fatigue. But slowly her words changed. Today, she wrote, my back feels open like it trusts me again. She began to see how consistency was its own kind of strength. It wasn't the dramatic changes that mattered. It was the quiet ones, the way her spine no longer protested every bend, the way her breath deepened without thought. Her balance improved, but more importantly, her confidence returned. She walked taller both in body and spirit. The exercise had become her reminder that age is not limitation. It's a different kind of wisdom, one that moves slower but sees deeper. Margaret realized the transformation wasn't just physical. It was emotional, almost spiritual. She was rebuilding a relationship with her body, one bend at a time. Each motion told her, you are still capable. Each breath whispered, you are still strong. The garden outside no longer waited in silence. She moved among the flowers freely again, bending, reaching, smiling. The sun touched her face, and she felt alive in every corner of her being. Her body had remembered, and she had learned to listen. That was the real transformation. Not just in motion, but in meaning. In choosing to move, she had chosen to live fully again. It was a soft morning when Margaret realized how naturally her body moved now. She no longer needed to remind herself to stretch or to breathe. Her movements had become part of her rhythm, part of her day. She began to find ways to weave the knee-to-toe bend into ordinary moments. While brushing her teeth, she bent her knees slightly, grounding herself. When waiting for the kettle to boil, she flowed through slow, gentle bends. Each small motion reminded her that movement doesn't need a schedule. It simply needs presence. Her body had become her companion again, not her obstacle. She noticed how her steps felt lighter when she walked to the market. Her spine stood straighter, her balance steadier with every stride. Neighbors began to notice too. You seem younger, one said with a smile. Margaret laughed softly, replying, maybe I just move differently now. And it was true. She had learned to live inside her body again, to move with awareness instead of fear. She carried that practice everywhere she went. When she bent to water her plants, her back no longer protested. When she reached for a book on the top shelf, She moved with care, not hesitation. Her body felt like an instrument tuned to peace. It no longer fought against time, it flowed with it. She began teaching her granddaughter how to do the same bends. They stood side by side in the living room, laughing at their mismatched rhythm. The child moved freely, the elder moved mindfully. And somewhere in between, they met in joy. Margaret found beauty in that connection, the circle of movement through generations. She realized that health was not about doing more, but about doing with love. Even the smallest actions carried meaning when done with intention. The knee-to-toe bend became a quiet anchor in her days, a way to pause, breathe, and remind herself that life was still unfolding gently. On rainy afternoons, she would still practice, listening to the sound of droplets outside. Her body swayed in rhythm with the rain, soft, calm, alive. She understood now that consistency was a form of devotion. To care for the body was to thank it for all it had carried. To move each day was to whisper gratitude into her own bones. The stiffness that once defined her mornings was now a memory. It had been replaced by motion, slow, tender, honest motion. She no longer waited for perfect days or perfect strength. Every movement was enough. Every breath was progress. Her daily routine had become her quiet ceremony of care. And through it she found freedom, not in youth, but in harmony. Margaret looked out at her garden one afternoon, standing tall and peaceful. She bent her knees, touched her toes, and rose again, smiling. The world moved gently around her, and she moved with it. Not to chase time, but to dance within it. Because she had learned that movement, no matter how small, keeps the spirit forever alive. The evening light touched the walls in gold. Margaret sat by her window, her breath calm and steady. Her back no longer spoke in pain, but in quiet strength. She smiled, knowing her journey wasn't about youth, but renewal. Every bend, every breath, had become a promise to herself. A promise to stay connected, to move, to live fully. She looked at her hands, at the lines time had written there. They no longer told stories of age, but of care. Outside, the garden swayed gently in the wind. The same garden that once waited for her now danced with her. Margaret stood slowly, her body light, her heart open. She took one more gentle knee-to-toe bend, just as the sun faded. The motion felt effortless, like breathing. She rose, inhaled deeply, and whispered softly, "Thank you." Thank you to her body, her breath, her patience. Thank you to time, for teaching her grace in movement. Because after 60, she had learned something timeless. Strength doesn't fade with age, it changes its rhythm. And in that rhythm, life continues to move beautifully forward.